Welcome to the iPub Cloud International Town Hall Series, Chapters and Conversations. I'm Elise Draper, and in this episode, I'm joined by two incredible guests, Marcia Rudin and Rabbi James Rudin, for a powerful conversation about the newly released book, Stress Test: The Israel-Hamas War and Christian-Jewish Relations, edited by Carol Rittner and John K. Roth. Stress Test brings together essays from 12 respected American Christian scholars, educators, and thought leaders. The book explores how the ongoing conflict in Gaza is impacting Christian-Jewish relations and the urgent questions facing those of us committed to interfaith dialogue in a fractured world. In this episode, Marcia and Rabbi Rudin each engage with a different chapter from the book, offering personal reflections and deep insight into the conversations we all need to be having. Stick around through the end of the episode for details on how to get your own copy of Stress Test. So what I want to do is actually make sure that everybody understands the qualifications of the people that we have coming in. They are beloved by us, obviously, and tremendous reviewers, but their voices in particular should highlight the importance of the work that we are producing, and the authors who have produced it. So Marcia Rudin is the author of novels Hear My Voice and Flower Towards the Sun. She was born in Pueblo, Colorado, so my neck of the woods, which is wonderful, and grew up in Champaign, Illinois. You graduated magna cum laude from Boston University, majoring in philosophy and religion, where she was elected to the Phi Delta Kappa Honorary Society. You've also studied social anthropology and theology at the University of Edinburgh, earning a second honors. You received a joint master's degree in religion from Columbia University and Union Theological Seminary, which is important because of how that ties to who you chose to discuss. Specializing in philosophy and religion, you have studied for your PhD in philosophy at the New School of Social Research after teaching history of religion at Brooklyn Friends School. You joined the faculty of Williams-Patterson College in New Jersey. We taught philosophy, history of religion, and philosophy of education at both undergraduate and graduate levels. You've also been a guest professor and lecturer at St. Leo University in St. Leo, Florida. We actually worked with you on the book, you and Jim and Rabbi Herschel Jaffe on Why Not Me. Tremendous book that talks about surviving, supporting on friends, coming together, and the joint spirituality, doctors and family and friends aspect of patients' rights and surviving, not just physically, but mentally. That is a tremendous book. It is available on iPub Cloud. There's also on our YouTube channel our last town hall meeting, which was with Rabbi Herschel Jaffe, discussing that exact book. So people can go visit that on YouTube. I really, for me, I thought what was some of the most interesting books that you have taken part in was the New Religious Cults. And some of the work that you and Jim have done together in the Prisoner Paradise. So a lot of sociological, philosophical, grounded studies in your past. Why did you choose to do that? What was your influence to do that?
I'm kind of old, so I've had 3 careers. I was teaching, but then left to get married, and I wanted to have children right away. In those days, it was kind of difficult to do both. Now you could do
Sure.
And then inadvertently, Jim and I got involved in the counter-cult movement by writing really the first book about cults. They're now mostly written by ex-members. And I did that work for many, many years. And then couldn't take the psychological ramifications of that kind of work.
A lot, yeah.
I then began writing. So it's been kind of a long career. And I'm very happy to be associated with you people.
We are too. Okay, well, you had chosen chapter 5, which is protesting the Hamas war implications for religions between Religions Between Christians and Jews by Dr. Mary Boyes. Professor Boyes is a member of the Sisters of the Holy Names of Jesus and Mary since 1965. She's a renowned Catholic scholar in Jewish-Christian relations. She holds honorary doctorates from the leading Jewish and Catholic institutions and has received multiple awards for her interfaith work. A formerly Lily and Luke follower, she has taught institutions including Princeton Theological Seminary and co-directed a major project on religion and pluralism. She serves on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Committee on Religion, Ethics, and Holocaust. And Professor Boyes is the author and editor of 10 books, has published widely on theology, education, and interreligious dialogue. So her contribution to this book obviously is incredibly important. Why did you choose working with Mary Boyes? What was your draw to this chapter?
First of all, we know her personally. She's just a really wonderful woman, very wonderful friend of the Jewish community. Also, I went to Union Theological Seminary, as you pointed out in my biography. So I was interested in their take on the whole situation with the Gaza war. It was a very, really wonderfully written chapter, and she's a very clear writer. And it was a very balanced, she gave a very balanced view of things in her chapter. She was somewhat horrified by Union Theological Seminary students had put out a statement after the October 7th
yes.
situation. She was horrified by the students and tried to modify it. Then the faculty, the union faculty, put out a statement, but both of the statements by the students and by the faculty were comparatively moderate, considering other statements of this situation.
Exactly.
Union has always been a very liberal theological institution, very liberal theologically. I mean, it's Presbyterian, but very liberal theologically. It was always very multicultural. I was there many over 60 years ago, so of course there was nothing about Israel or Gaza or anything like that then. But I think for Union, what I know about it, its statement was fairly moderate, but Dr. Boyes was very horrified by the students. They condemned Israel and also didn't want any more Zionist speakers. Dr. Boyes accepts the responsibility or the situation of Christian anti-Semitism contributing to the anti-Semitism that she feels was part of the students' reaction, as it is, I believe, in all these liberal students' reactions. I would like to point out, if I could just answer some of the students' accusations at this point.
Yes.
That and now I don't want to be seen as being for any of these horrible killings and displacements of refugees. This
Absolutely
situation, I don't want people to think that I am not sensitive to that. However, when you're in a war, civilians are unfortunately also affected very poorly. This has been since the beginning of time. I saw on television a young woman talking against Israel, saying that wars, only normal wars, not the one Israel is in, only soldiers are affected. Well, that's ridiculous. It's not true. Civilians have been affected from the beginning of time. World War II, look, we dropped the atom bomb, the Vietnamese War. We just saw something about just horrible, huge numbers of civilians killed and displaced. I am now reading a fascinating book, a novel about the communist revolution in China, the refugees that were displaced. And let me just say this in terms of answering these students, there is no country of Palestine. There's no country called Palestine. Israel was called Palestine before the 1948 United Nations declaration of creating the State of Israel. At that time, when Israel was created by President Truman in 1948, the Palestinians were also given a homeland, a little bit, I guess, to the north. Both homelands actually quite small, Israel much smaller than it is today. They did not accept the homeland. What did they do? They started a war that very day against Israel. And Israel, because it won the war, became much larger than it would have been. They have the Palestinians, and I don't want you to think I'm not sympathetic to their plight. They have been offered a homeland 2, 3, maybe 4 times throughout the years in the negotiations. They've always refused it because they really don't want a homeland. They want what is now Israel. They want it destroyed. They want the Jews gone. That's what they really want. Also, the people who are in charge of the Palestinians, Hamas and all those different organizations, they don't really care about the Palestinian situation. First of all, when the State of Israel was declared, and there were, I guess, thousands of refugees, Palestinian refugees, none of the Arab countries would take them in. They were put in these terrible, terrible camps. The Arab countries kept them terrible for public relations reasons. They have been offered a homeland. I don't believe they really want a homeland. They want Israel. They want it destroyed. Well, I also want to say to the critics of Israel, what do you think the United States would do if an entity was dedicated to its destruction and destruction of every living person in America? We would hardly be using restraint. Now, this is not to, I don't know anything more about the politics of Israel than anybody else. And I'm not saying I'm 100% what Israel is doing. There have been cruelties, I know, and I feel badly for the Palestinians and the refugees. But this is a situation, first of all, every other country in the world that's ever been to war, they have killed innocent people. This is an unfortunate fact. It seems that only Jews or only Israel are kept to this high standard. I think Dr. Boy's chapter was very, very balanced. She brings out some of these points. I really admire her attempt to counterbalance the students' declaration and
Yes.
the declaration. She did her best to try to create a more balanced criticism.
Well, and I in reading her chapter myself, there is a certain amount of knowledge on a timeline that doesn't exist for quite a few of the protesters. There is such a thing as you can be pro-Palestinian for the innocents there, but that does not mean that you are automatically or should take a stance against Israel, because the timeline is significant. Now, and Dr. Boyce is particularly well educated on the timeline. So what I felt that is, especially initially, was that she was trying to express a more balanced understanding of not only war, philosophically, emotionally, but how it's always been this way, and that there is a significant timeline of pain and that Israel has had to absorb as well. That there are responses, and for 20 years, the United States was at war. What happened on 9/11 was awful. And then we sacked Baghdad. There are choices that are made by governments that are not directly reflecting those choices of the citizens. So attacking Israel as a whole is
also
short-sighted.
I'd kind of like to point out they are basing their criticism of Israel on the war that Israel declared after October 7th. However, immediately after October 7th, before Israel went to war, which was like a day or two later, or three, the anti-Semitic attacks started before all what they're talking about in terms of the displacement of Palestinians and the treatment.
Yes.
Unleashed it's just ironic, but the attack on Israel unleashed I guess, sort of kept in bounds the anti-Semitism that has been festering underneath, regardless of Israel's action in this situation. True. So you can't blame, the anti-Semitism which is coming after the start of the war. It was before that. Just ironically, right before that, and so. It's very convenient to blame Israel for everything. God knows Netanyahu. It's a horrifying situation, and I always feel too that we don't know what's going on underneath all of this and the negotiations, and maybe Netanyahu.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to defend Israel. I don't know any more than anybody else, and we have family there, who that we're concerned about. Everybody.
Yes.
So, but I really wanted to compliment Dr. Boyce. She's just a wonderful woman, been a wonderful friend to Jews, and this chapter was so balanced in her attempts to moderate Union Theological, which is seminary, which is a really liberal, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but
progressive. It's progressive, yeah.
They've always been multicultural and way ahead of all kinds of seminaries. Many Christians wouldn't go to that seminary. It's very liberal, and always has been. And I really wanted to compliment her on that chapter in this book.
Oh, and it really is quite powerful. She does have a lot to say. When she made her official statements, as far as what your understanding of the book, do you think she was successful? Do you think that the students are getting her message?
No, and she acknowledges that.
Do you think it is possible to not be anti-Semitic but still condemn Israel?
Yes. Many Jews have condemned Israel. However, Jim could really probably speak more to that. It's a very complex situation.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to know if
many Jews who are, of course, not anti-Semitic, have criticized Israel.
Okay.
And there's a lot to criticize. I mean, I don't know all this military stuff. But on the other hand, we have to think, what would we do? And of course, we saw a bit of it in 9/11. But we're not surrounded physically
by enemies
by hostile. Yeah.
No, I understand that completely.
What would the United States do in this kind of situation? But the anti-Semitism and the criticism of Israel in this situation, it's very intermingled, I think, because there's not a clear picture of the situation. The treatment of the Palestinian refugees by their own people, by the other countries who don't really care about them. It's just a very complicated situation.
I think it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Jim could really
and there needs to be a general division. It is very, very easy for the world.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Ask you a question. First of all, thank you very much, if I may call you Marcia, because it's our first time that we've ever met. I agree that Mary Boyce's chapter is extremely interesting. I'd say it's probably out of date, as I actually think our book is out of date because so much has happened in the last number of months. I don't think I have to defend my own position in terms of Israel or involvement at whatever level I've been involved in dialogue between Jews and Christians. But I do feel, Marcia, that you've made a number of like wild generalizations. I mean, to say there is no Palestine, why are we calling these people Palestinians? And I think I'm for a two-state solution, which I understand is becoming less and less, so to speak, a position of many people, because many people feel they cannot trust anyone, obviously we can't trust Hamas, but spokespersons on the Palestinian side. But I absolutely think it's possible to criticize the government of the state of Israel without being an anti-Semite. I mean, I condemn, just as I condemn a lot of the actions of the American government at this point. Although I agree, this is an extremely complex situation. As I say in my own essay, I'm not a historian, I'm not a political scientist, I'm not an expert on the Middle East. But I have to say that some of the decisions and actions of the government of Israel, the language that some of the ministers are using in regard to Palestinians, I mean, it's reprehensible. And this is what I think is so difficult in the dialogue between Jews and Christians. I mean, I really feel, I've been on several Zooms where there was discussion about the war in Gaza, the Middle East. And most recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, I think it was the ICCJ discussion. And I feel like the scholars who spoke and made comments, they had these theoretical statements about, the history of this, that, and the other thing. There was one rabbi whose name escapes me at the moment. John, you might know who the rabbi is, who I felt was the only one who really raised issues about the war in Gaza. This is prior to the bombing of Iran. I just had to say that I absolutely think a person can disagree and condemn the many of the actions and decisions and the behavior of the government.
I don't disagree with you at all, and neither does Jim.
Well, Jim has to speak up and say that.
he's allowing Marcia to have her voice. Yes.
In all my work, Sister Carol, since 1968 in interreligious relations, I have spoken, written, condemned, shouted, cried. A double standard is often applied to Israel. That which other countries carry out, including the Syrians, including Hezbollah, including in South America, Israel has always been judged, in my opinion, in my experience, by a double standard. All I've ever asked for in my work and my writings, we quoting religious terminology, use the same weights and scales and balances that you do for any other country. Do it for Israel. But the problem is Israel is the Jew. It's the eternal Jew, the universal Jew, and it feeds anti-Semitism.
Marcia, thank you so much. I think answering the students' questions, because that's where, especially in a progressive university, answering upfront to the students' questions is absolutely what Mary Boyes was trying to do, Dr. Boyes was doing, and what you have added to, I think, is is, if anything else, philosophically, I find it interesting because you have such a take on tribalism as it pertains to how we interact with one another, and then the actual understanding of history. I get that the Palestine statement is more about boundaries, not a people. And the Palestinians are a tribe just as much as the Israelis. So that there is a difference there. And condemnation for government's choices is different than anti-Semitism against a people of race or faith. And I think that's been made clear. And thank you so much, Marcia. That was wonderful. Now, I would really like, because as Carol said, let's get Jim in on this. Let me go ahead and introduce Rabbi James Rudin as a member of the American Jewish Committee's professional staff for 32 years. Rabbi Rudin served as the AJC's Interreligious Affairs Director. He is currently the AJC's Senior Interreligious Advisor and a member of the organization's Board of Governors. In 2022, Rabbi Rudin was named the Papal Knight of St. Gregory by Pope Francis. So technically it's Sir Rudin. He is a distinguished visiting professor of religion and Judica at St. Leo's University and has taught at Florida's Gulf Coast University Renaissance Academy. Rabbi Rudin serves as congregations in Kansas City, Missouri, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and was a United States Air Force chaplain stationed in Japan and Korea. Rabbi Rudin is here talking about Chapter 6, Catholic Religious Relations, with their discontents in the Israel-Hamas War, the Holocaust, and a Globalized War by Dr. Massimo Fagioli. Dr. Fagioli is a professor of theology and religious studies at College of Liberal Arts and Villanova University. He is an expert in history and administrative workings with Czech Catholic Church and the papacy, and is an Italian academic, church historian, and professor of theology, as we said. He's also a columnist for LaCroix International and is a contributing writer for Commonwealth. Why did you feel you wanted to write about Dr. Fagioli? What brought you to him to your attention?
Well, I've known, including Sister Carol Rittner and John Roth, I've known or worked with many of the contributors to this book, and they've been and are dear friends and colleagues for 30, 40, 50 years. And I wanted to take a chapter from someone I've never met, but whose writings I admire very much. And so instead of writing about personal friends that she's terrific, he's terrific, and then, I've known them for 30 years, worked with them, argued with them, agreed with them, I wanted to take something a little different, someone, who I have never met, but who I've been attracted to his writings. Also, as it turned out, luck had it, he taught and teaches at a university where Robert Prevost, Pope Leo XIV, went to school. So it was a natural for me.
Yes.
So I put it together. I found his writings, not the Pope, but Professor Fagioli's writings, very, very important and incisive because he brings, at least I found something new. He's talking about that since 1945, the end of the Second World War, the end of Nazi Germany, and militaristic Japan and fascist Italy, the end of the war, Christian-Jewish relations developed, particularly with two centers, North America and Europe. Remember that the Holocaust took place in Europe, and John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, said it took place in the heart of Christian Europe. So it was natural that Christians in North America, because Canada and the United States were engaged very heavily in World War II, including every male of age in my family, including my father, to defeat Nazi Germany. Natural that Christian-Jewish relations in general and Catholic-Jewish relations in particular would be led by, would focus on, and would be taking place in either North America or Europe. And that's the way it was beginning in 45 and going through until now. Professor Fagioli is absolutely correct. He picks up on the point that it's been 80 years since the end of World War II, and the growth, particularly of the Roman Catholic population, as everyone knows who studies this, has not been in North America and in Europe, but in Asia, Africa, South America, particularly Southeast Asia. Areas of the world where the war was not fought, except for North Africa, and areas of the world where Catholic population is growing quite large, but areas of the world where Jewish communities are much smaller in number. Of course, Israel itself, people forget, is in Asia, Southwest Asia, but by and large, South America, Africa, India, and other parts of Asia do not have the substantial Jewish communities that North America has, or even Europe. So what he points out is, can the Shoah, the Hebrew word for Holocaust, which has been so central to Christian-Jewish relations since 1945, because of Christian leaders like Carol Rittner, Mary Boyce, Pope John Paul II, so many others, Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, felt a sense of Christian responsibility, not personally sometimes, most of the time, but the teachings of Christianity, how they were distorted and used to justify killing Jews en mass murder, that has come to an end in terms of time frame. And he raises the question, can the dialogue be sustained, or how will it be changed in the face of this new demographic, spiritual difference after 80 years? And I think it's a very fair question. And he raises a very important point. Can the Christian, Jewish, Catholic Jewish in particular, be carried on specifically, he doesn't use the phrase, but I would, waving the same banner of Holocaust remembrance, Shoah remembrance, and instead, does it need a reshaping? Now, to his credit, he says the gains that have been achieved during the last 80 years, and he talks about the obvious Vatican Council and much of the 30 years since the Vatican and the State of Israel established full be taken away or weakened in any way. But he wants to raise the question, what now? He doesn't say what now. And I think he raises an interesting point, more than interesting, for the future of interreligious dialogue between Christians and Jews. And he makes the point also that Muslims must also be included. He also believes that Catholic education Catholic educators and Catholic education has a great responsibility in not washing out the achievements of the past 80 years, God forbid, but that Catholic education now has a role to play from kindergarten through seminaries of building on those advances that have been made but moving forward in a different way. And I have a personal thought that I don't think he mentioned, but he comes close to talking about it. The Catholic Church is a transnational entity. It's not an American church. Yes, the Pope now is born in Chicago, but he spent 20 years in South America. The Jewish, and so it's a transnational. It's not linked to any one national entity. Interestingly enough, the Jewish people, I'm talking about the totality, the Jewish people, is also a transnational group. Yes, of course, the majority of today's Jews live in Israel, but there's also a diaspora, historic diaspora. So both communities are transnational. And in that sense, the opportunities for education are very, very important to be. And he does, of course, talk about how the war, the Hamas war, has put those relationships to the stress test that John Roth and Carol Rittner wrote about. But I do want to come back again to that double standard I found in my work, day in and day out, day in and day out. Israel has always been held to a higher standard. That's very flattering, but it's very destructive. Israel should be judged as Syria is judged, as the United States is judged, as Iran is judged, as Sudan is judged. Yes, I know there are differences, but don't make Jews and the Jewish state jump through more hoops than you ask your own country to do or other countries. And that's what I found. And I also found.
Absolutely.
I also found, and this is just my Jewish soul speaking, there was a time when I was growing up, although, as I said, every male in my family was in the military. My late brother was in the army, and I was in the military. The Jews they draft dodgers. 600,000 American Jews were in the Second World War. They're draft dodgers, they're weaklings, they're cowards, they're yellow-bellied. Now what we have is the Jews are the toughest army in the world, the greatest air force in the world, the most destructive force in the world. It's the same as the old anti-Semites used to say. The Jews were the communist leaders, but also the international bankers. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't be cowards and then have the most powerful air force in the Middle East. It doesn't compute. So again, it comes down to a double standard. Judge Israel's behavior, harsh as it may be, critical as it may be, or judge it by its standards that you give to every other country. And so hopefully what I found in Professor Fagioli was a hope that the Catholic education system, and he was talking mostly about Pope Francis, who of course was alive when the book was completed.
The book came out, exactly.
The book came out, who got into some, as he admits, not the Pope, but the professor at Villanova, got into some trouble with some phrasing and some constructions that he made about the war. But Fagioli is hopeful that the gains will be made, and once the war is over, he concludes his last sentence, once the war is over, Catholic educators will have a huge role to play, building on what has been achieved. So I conclude by saying, and I'm certainly open to questions, he's not negating the 80 years between 1945 and 2025, which focused very much on Christian involvement, responsibility for the Holocaust. And by the way, Christians who fought against the Holocaust in countries led by Christians who defeated Nazi Germany, always remembering that. He says that can't be weakened in any way, but we have to now look we cannot continue to just focus on the Shoah, on the Holocaust, for future Christian Jewish and Catholic Jewish relations. So it's an interesting chapter, and it talks about the changes. He uses a word, and I will conclude here, the globalization of the church. It's not an American church. It's not an Italian church. It's a global church. And as I said just a few minutes ago, the Jewish people are a global people, have always been.
Yeah.
Yes, we're to the land of Israel, our biblical homeland, but that doesn't mean that every Jew lives in Israel or every Jew.
Right.
So that's what makes, I think, that chapter very important and a very important.
I do you, talking about the global faiths, and the Abrahamic aspect of it definitely leads to trying to find a mutuality there. What do you think decreases for he brought this up, so I was wondering, for the decreasing Catholic population in North America and Europe, and the church's growth in Asia, Africa, and South America?
Well, we've got a Catholic sister who can answer that, but
Probably better, huh?
I was told by half humorously, half seriously, by Catholics who live where we live in our retirement center. Some of them come from families of 8, 9, 12, 14 children. Yeah. They have 2 or maybe 1.9 children. I never got who that 9/10 of a child was. But seriously, it would be told to me many times by priests and Catholic lay people and sisters. Once upon a time, there were 8, 9, 10 in say, an American Catholic family. One would become a nun, one would become a priest, and
at least one would be given to the church.
And now it's 2.0. One becomes a hedge fund manager. Yeah, a computer game artist. So reduced birth rate, particularly among Irish. Sister Carol can confirm it even more. Irish, Catholic, Polish background, a reduced birth rate, and reduced number of families, except I would suspect and do know in Hispanics families, but even there, the number is down. So in Canada and the United States, the birth rate is down, and Pope Benedict XVI complained about European Catholic growth, which was really, for him, alarming, very alarming.
You mean lack of growth?
Lack of growth.
Lack of growth, yes, yeah.
Exactly right, lack of growth. So here we are. If Professor is correct from Villanova, he says, and I would agree with him, that it was North America and Europe that carried Christian-Jewish relations, Catholic-Jewish relations since 1945. If Catholic growth is down in North America and in Europe, that means that the dialogue also drops down, and so it's a serious question that he raises. Fagioli raises it very, very eloquently.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. I actually enjoyed his chapter quite a bit. How would you explain that population shift as it affects the Christian-Jewish relationship?
Well, I think it presents a real problem for Jewish leaders. I mean, I'm very kind. I'm the senior interreligious advisor, but I'm not the interreligious affairs director anymore. So whatever hair I have is very gray. It presents a real challenge because we could always go to Cardinal Willebrands, Cardinal Cassidy, Father Edward Flannery, Sister Carol Rittner, and on and on and on. who were either North American based or European based, or who were keenly aware, or sometimes if they were older, lived through the Holocaust as Catholics. And I'm thinking particularly the late great Father Edward Flannery, who wrote one of the first books called The Anguish of the Jews. So they were fully aware and took response. And then when we had a Pope from Poland who actually lived through the Nazi occupation of his country and lost his friendships.
He had a Jewish girlfriend.
And maybe a Jewish teenage girlfriend.
He did.
He did. And so many of his friends in Wadowice were were Jews. So then you had the personal relationships. Well, now we've moved on, just time has moved. So it's a challenge for Jewish dialogue partners they cannot just, and I agree here with Fagioli very much, he says you just cannot make the Holocaust solely the foundation stone of Catholic Jewish, Christian Jewish relations. That's a shift which is based on demography and time.
Don't you think?
Yes, and generational, I think, as well.
Don't you think, too, that part of the problem is that, well, really for both Catholics and Jews, there are so many other important issues that this issue's kind of, slipped a little in terms of the commitment of staff, the commitment of attention, and there's lots of other things that have cropped up.
I think Marcia's right. I've heard many times in my work, particularly in the latter years, the decade of the 90s, from both Catholics and Jews, particularly lay people. Well, we settled that. We've got good relations. We've got the Vatican Council. We have Nostra Aetate. We have formal diplomatic relations between the Vatican and between Israel.
And
so
but also, they all have staff cuts, of course, with budgetary problems, not committing the same kind of staff.
Sure.
Lay people.
Sure.
And
now,
I think Sister Carol will know that at the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, the first professional leader for Catholic Jewish relations was Father Edward Flannery, followed by Dr. Eugene Fisher. But since then, there really hasn't been anybody whose full-time job was Catholic Jewish relations. In the American Jewish community, a similar trend.
That's right.
The Anti-Defamation League, which was led by some very, very prominent and excellent leaders, no longer has anybody full-time and my own organization, I used to supervise 4 and 5 people. There is one person now in doing interreligious work globally with the retirement of Rabbi David Rosen, Rabbi Noah Marins. So in both communities, they've cut back on professional leadership. And if you don't have the professional leadership leading it, creating it, pushing it, it can stagnate. And,
yes.
And again, they'll sum up not only Catholic and Christian and Jewish lay people, but clergy have said, well, I've heard rabbis say over and over again, there are other things we have to worry about than Christian-Jewish relations. You guys took care of that. It's done. And of course, it's not done, as this book indicates.
There's just so many other things. There's so many things to do.
Yes, and actually, John Roth actually has his hand up. He wanted to ask a few questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Thank you. I want to make a few comments more than ask questions, because there are some words of thanks that need to be conveyed here. When Carol Rittner and I were organizing this book and looking for a publisher for it, we became aware of iPub, and we saw that Rabbi Jim Rudin had published with iPub. And so we requested of him a chance to have a Zoom conversation to find out a little bit more about this publishing house, which was a new initiative for Carol and me, but one that attracted our interest because iPub has a mission to engage in dialogue on hard topics, and in particular interreligious dialogue. So Jim, as I'll call him, Rabbi Rudin, was kind enough to grant us a Zoom conversation. And when we told him what we were doing and asked his views about iPub, he responded with the greatest enthusiasm and said, "Oh, you should definitely publish your book with them." So my word of thanks is to Jim Rudin, but he's really responsible for the book Stress Test being published with iPub, and we're immensely grateful to him for that. And Marcia, I want to also thank you for your participation here today, and some of the comments I'll make will gradually work around to your reflections on Mary Boyce's good chapter in the book. Carol and I are sometimes asked, how did we select the authors to contribute to this book? There are 12 of them, and they're all Americans, with the possible exception of Massimo Faglioli. He came to our attention because Massimo is a journalist who very often publishes kind of cutting-edge op-ed essays in various publications. And some of these op-ed pieces came to our attention, to Carol's attention and to mine, and we said, oh, we need to include him in our book. But then when we discovered more about his biography, it turns out he's Italian, except he's taught for many, many years now at Villanova, and he's, as we learned, a permanent resident of the United States, but his citizenship is Italian. But we made an exception for him on our rule about having American Christians write for this book. And Massimo, thankfully, has an essay in the volume, and as Jim Rudin has pointed out, it's a very important one because of the vision and angle that he takes on it, including the emphasis on the globalization of Roman Catholicism now and how that may change and affect the Jewish-Christian dialogue, which has been rooted so strongly and appropriately in the Holocaust and post-Holocaust reflection. So just a word about the American emphasis in this book. Carol and I thought, we're both American Christians. I'm Protestant, Carol's Catholic, but we both thought that because of the strong connections between the United States and Israel, and because of the large Jewish population in the United States, that it would be useful and appropriate for a volume to contain the reflections of American Christians with regard to the Christian-Jewish dialogue in the context of the Hamas-Israel war. And so that's why the book has kind of an American flavor to it, which continues to be very, very important as we think about how events have unfolded. Right now in the United States, under President Trump, there's a debate going on about, what should the United States do with respect to the Israeli bombardments of Iran. And Carol mentioned in passing that she thought our book was somewhat outdated. I understand that. It's hard to write a book or to have a book that deals with current events that doesn't become dated in some ways. But I think an equal argument could be made that the essays in this book are all the more timely and current because of the very issues they raise, one of which that Carol and I pointed out in our introduction was that we were worried that the Hamas-Israel war would spiral into a regional war. And it has done that. So this is another wrinkle, a hard one in the Christian-Jewish discussion. So, Marcia, coming back to your discussion of Mary Boyce's essay, it leads me to make a point that I remember from her chapter, and I think it's the hallmark of her chapter from the perspective of the Christian part of the Christian-Jewish dialogue in the context of the conflict in the Middle East. What Mary emphasizes over and over again, and it's her bottom line, and it's the reason why she was so upset about some of the things that went on at Union and some of the things that were going on at Columbia right next door, her key message is that no matter what happens, American Christians in particular, and American Christians too, must never relinquish the awareness of Christian anti-Semitism as a contributor to these issues, and therefore must always be vigilant against anti-Semitism. That, I think, is the key point that Mary makes, and what she was worried about in part, and she saw happening at Union among the students, was that they might be forgetting about the Christian responsibility to stand firm against anti-Semitism. Now, it's more complicated than that, of course, because there are ways right now in which it can be argued that anti-Semitism has been weaponized in an attack on higher education in the United States. And so all these issues have a complexity about them that is really right at the heart of the need for renewed Christian-Jewish dialogue. The last point I want to make goes back, Rabbi Rudin, to your comment about the double standard. And right at the beginning of Carol Rittner and my introduction to the stress test book, I just looked at it. It's on page 4 of the book. It's acknowledged that, yes, there is a double standard toward Israel. And we highlight an op-ed that appeared while we were working on the book that came from the New York Times editorialist Nicholas Kristof, who explicitly in an editorial addressed this question. And his answer, and I think Carol and I accept it, is yes, there is a double standard with respect to Israel. And shame on us for that, because what that means is not that we shouldn't be talking about what's going on that might have Israeli responsibility for suffering in the world, but that we need to be equally diligent about calling attention to other cases that are going on, including, I would say, ones in the United States where Americans are complicit in massive human suffering.
Yes.
So I think the point is well taken that there is a double standard, but I would add that that doesn't mean that we should ignore or not discuss or talk about what's happening in the Middle East. And one of the things at the time that led Kristof to say that, in effect, was that he was particularly taken by the plight of children, Palestinian children in Gaza. And he said that when he wrote his op-ed, it might be outdated now because of American policies that have put at risk millions of African children because we are withholding food from them in our foreign aid program. But at the time Kristof wrote his article, he was moved by the plight of Palestinian children.
Yes.
And therefore,
and
it was right to call attention to what was going on, even though doing so might also reveal the double standard. So I just wanted to bring that point in, that the book Stress Test deals with that question, but does not conclude, therefore, that you shouldn't talk about what's going on, which I think Rabbi
dialogue
would agree with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the dialogue. It's the opening up education fronts. And I think something that I picked up on from their interpretations from both Marcia and Jim Rudin, there needs to be a better education, a better influence, less tribalism, less need to blame, while also holding ourselves in the same place of responsibility, so that we understand, and that there is something that I think Professor Vajoli and Jim both touched on, is that there is we do not have the same leaders generationally now striving forward for these communications and support. So I guess ultimately I have a question for the four of you. What do you think we can do? What do you think IPUB could do? What do you think would be the overall message to increase dialogue? We are faced with, in the United States, anti-intellectualism. That is also one of the hierarching reasons why people are attacking higher education. And you're right, they have weaponized anti-Semitism. It is a spear just to place blame on a progressive ideology. So that is awful. It is awful what we are facing on the stage of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. The four of you are a generation who understands exactly what needs to happen. We've touched in the book, you touched on the Second Vatican Council. All of these points of expansion and understanding each other. How do we help? What can we do to increase dialogue? What do the four of you, as closing statements, think that we could do to increase dialogue? Jim and Marcia, what would you say?
I'm gonna turn over my time to Jim, because dialogue in general is in great danger.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be any, and
political or religious.
I'm going to turn it over to Jim, because
dialogue's his bread and butter. At least it used to be.
I'm going to let our cleaning woman in. Excuse me. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I want to leave you with a haunting question from my military experience in Japan. I was asked in 1961 to talk about the Adolf Eichmann trial, which was going on in Jerusalem at the time that I was in Japan. And all they talked about was nothing about the Nazis. The questions, it was all about the atomic bomb. And then they asked the question that still haunts me. And I was with Mr. Truman, Harry Truman, when I was in Kansas City. I should have asked him this, but I didn't have the courage. They said, would the United States have dropped an atomic bomb on white people, meaning Germany, Berlin? And I had an out because the war ended in May 45, and the first atomic bomb was tested in July 45. So I leave that double standard. Did we have a double standard as Americans that it was okay to drop not one but two atomic bombs on Japan? And what would we have done if Germany was still active? So I'm not asking you to answer it, but to think about how complex this all is. It's not so easy. Not so easy. So again, I ask for equal weights, equal measures. Judge Netanyahu the way you would judge Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, anybody else as a leader. He judge him by the same standard that you judge every other political leader. Judge Israel by the same standard you judge our own country, and be as tough on Israel as you want, but be just as tough on any other country like South Sudan or any other country that is persecuting its people or not. So that's my point. But Fagioli is right. The dialogue has to continue. The foundation has been laid. Time has passed. Let's move forward, but not chuck everything out the window that John Roth, Carol Rittner, Marcia Rudin, I, and many, many others have achieved.
Absolutely.
That would be horrific. And I think if I had to sum up the book, for many authors, and I've read a lot of the chapters, in fact, I've read them all, it's more in sorrow than in anger.
It is.
The whole situation is sorrowful. And Mary Boyce and the chapter I emphasized, there's not anger. I think there's some very, very good prescriptions there for future dialogue people to follow.
Absolutely. And it is, the stress test is the sheer emotional response to world affairs right now, especially. So I
want to give you kudos for publishing this book. Really.
Absolutely. John and Carol, thank you so much for the work you did. And I do not believe that it's outdated. I just think that there's plenty of afterward this year alone to write its own book. So we'll do stress test 2.
Maybe that's what I should have said. We need a volume 2.
Right.
I do. You're asking what is it that we can do? I think you have to do more of these kinds of events, put them on YouTube, make them available to schools and universities.
Yes.
In Catholic seminaries, there has to be much more emphasis on the interreligious dialogue with a stress on Christian-Jewish dialogue, but Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, education is what needs to be done.
Yes, I think as far as dialogue, the anti-intellectualism is the worst part of this. That's what's pushing people away. Generations are not understanding.
Intellectualism is not new in the
No.
It's been out our history.
A couple of comments from my side here on this. First, I want to echo Carol's view and express thanks to Lise and the IPUB team for organizing this conversation. I think this is an example of good Jewish-Christian dialogue, especially as the program has unfolded a bit. So there's that. I found in my own experience locally, I live in a rural community in Washington State, and when it was announced that there could be a discussion about the Israel-Hamas war at our local public library, just when the book came out, and I was going to be there to kind of, promote the book a little bit, the expression of interest was quite amazing. I found that people were hungry for a chance to talk about these things, and to have it kind of moderated and guided a bit was helpful, but I found that. And I think in the chapters in the book, there are numerous examples of contributors to the book who have been involved in their locations, primarily on college and university campuses, to promote dialogue. And I think that that's one of the places where we must hope that there can be an advancement in dialogue, some of which will be explicitly Christian Jewish, but it needs to be broader than that too, to enhance education instead of protest and disturbances and interruptions. The campuses, especially the college and university campuses, are absolutely critical for this.
Right.
So anything that we can do to help that along is a good thing. And I think that the stress test volume has had a modest but significant impact in that area. Carol and I are aware of individuals who are using the book in courses that are being taught, and we're very pleased about that and hope that there will be more examples of it.
Yep.
Good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to finish off, thank you also very much. You've said very wonderful things about the publishing house, but let us explain. Just, we are so incredibly privileged to have you as dear friends to the publishing house, and our plight to try and get these ideas out, to share voices that need to be heard that may not be. This extraordinary volume brings together some of the most thoughtful and courageous voices in the field of Christian-Jewish dialogue. Michael G. Azar of the University of Scranton, Mary C. Boyes of Union Theological Seminary, Philip A. Cunningham of St. Joseph's University, Massimo Fagioli of Villanova University, Christopher M. Layton of the Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, James G. Paharik of Seton Hill University, John T. Pawlikowski of Catholic Theological Union, Peter A. Pettit of St. Paul Lutheran Church, Sarah K. Pinnock of Trinity University, Elena Procario Foley of Iona University, and finally, Carol Rittner of Stockton University and John K. Roth of Claremont McKenna College, the driving forces behind this book. As principal editors, they not only shaped the vision, but brought it fully to life, writing the introduction, assembling the contributors, crafting the vital timeline, authoring key chapters, and threading it all together with seamless transitions. Without their tireless leadership, this book simply wouldn't exist. They didn't just edit a volume, they built a forum. Thank you, guys. This has just been an absolute pleasure. And I know that everybody here is going to really appreciate everything you've had to say, and it will be made available on YouTube.
Right.
So,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. And we look forward to seeing everybody at future town hall events.